Imagine waking up every morning and seeing exactly how much life you have left. Not metaphorically, literally. A clock on your arm counting down every second until you die. 1 year's 1 month, 1 day's 1 hour. And if that timer hits zero, you drop dead instantly. That's the world of In Time. But here what makes the movie terrifying. The rich don't steal your money. They steal your time. And once you understand the difference, you realize this movie was never science fiction. It was a warning. In the world of In Time, humans stop aging at 25. Sounds perfect at first, eternal youth, no wrinkles, no old age, no natural death. But there's a catch. Once you turn 25, a countdown starts on your arm giving you exactly 1 year left to live. And from that moment on, time becomes currency. You buy coffee with minutes. Pay rent with weeks. Ride the bus with hours. Everything costs life itself. And if your balance reaches zero, you die immediately. Now on the surface this sounds creative, a clever sci-fi concept. But underneath, it's exposing something deeply disturbing about modern society. Because the movie understands a brutal truth most people never fully realize. Money is just stored human time. Think about it. When you work a job for 8 hours, you're literally trading pieces of your life for survival. Your energy, your attention, your youth, your existence itself gets converted into currency. And the system in Time removes the illusion completely. No paper monies. No credit cards. Just raw lifespan. And suddenly capitalism becomes brutally honest. The poor aren't losing dollars. They're losing life. Every late payment costs them existence. Every small expense becomes deadly. Every wasted minute carries terror. People sprint instead of walking because even small delays matter when you're living hour to hour. And that anxiety feels familiar for a reason. Because millions of people already live like that. One emergency away from collapse. One paycheck away from panic. One missed payment away from disaster. The movie just makes the invisible visible. And then you notice something even darker. The rich in this world don't merely have more wealth. They have more time to think. More time to breathe. More time to live. While poor people are forced into constant urgency. And that may be the most important idea in the entire film. Because exhaustion is control. If people are constantly stressed about survival, they stop questioning the system creating the stress. Their mental energy gets consumed by immediate problems: rent, bills, food, survival. No time to think bigger. No time to rebel. No time to escape. That's why the poor zones in Time move so fast. Everyone is rushing constantly because time scarcity creates psychological pressure, and pressure creates obedience. The rich understand this perfectly. That's why they don't need chains. Scarcity does the work for them. And then the movie introduces Will Salas, a man born into the lower zones where people live day to day, hour to hour. His mother works endlessly just to stay alive, and even then one small delay becomes fatal. That scene changes everything. Because she doesn't die from violence. She dies from running out of time. Literally. And the movie makes you watch every painful second of it. Two people desperately running toward each other while the clock bleeds to zero. And in that moment, the film reveals the cruelty of the system. The poor are not dying because resources are missing. They're dying because access is controlled. That's different. Very different. The world in Time actually has enough time for everyone to live comfortably. But the system intentionally creates scarcity because scarcity maintains hierarchy. That's the secret. The rich aren't rich because everyone else is poor accidentally. The imbalance is necessary. Because if everyone had enough time, nobody would accept exploitation anymore. People would stop working meaningless jobs. Stop tolerating abuse. Stop living in fear. And systems built on dependency would collapse instantly. So instead, the system keeps people desperate enough to participate. Barely surviving. Never stable. Always chasing. And suddenly the title In Time becomes genius. Because it's not just about time running out. It's about people being kept permanently in time. Always on schedule. Always productive. Always running. Like human batteries powering an economic machine. And the rich at the top understand something terrifying. When survival becomes expensive, people become controllable. That's why the wealthy zones in the movie feel almost unreal. Calm streets, slow movement, peaceful conversations. Nobody rushes because rich people have something the poor don't. Mental freedom. They can think long-term because they aren't trapped in survival mode. And that creates an invisible advantage far bigger than money itself. Because once you own someone's time, you own their choices. A person constantly fighting to survive cannot compete psychologically with someone who has decades to plan, learn, invest, and recover from mistakes. That's why inequality compounds itself. The rich don't just gain wealth. They gain freedom from urgency. And urgency destroys human potential. You see it everywhere in real life too. People working jobs they hate because they can't afford risk. Talented people never building businesses because failure could destroy them financially. Millions trapped in cycles of exhaustion too intense to escape. Not because they lack intelligence. Because they lack breathing room. And breathing room changes everything. That's why the rich in time protect the system so aggressively. They claim the imbalance is necessary. They argue that if everyone lived forever, society would collapse. Sound familiar? Every system in history eventually justifies inequality as necessary. Necessary for stability, necessary for growth, necessary for order. But underneath those arguments usually sits one hidden truth. Someone profits from scarcity. And the movie becomes even more disturbing when you realize the timekeepers, the police of this world, aren't really protecting justice. They're protecting the flow of time upward. That's the real function of many systems. Not fairness, maintenance, protecting the engine. Because the economy in time is designed like a giant extraction machine. Time flows from the bottom upward constantly. Workers lose lifetime while corporations and elites accumulate centuries. And the people at the top become effectively immortal. Think about how insane that is. The rich don't just live better. They literally live longer. That's not symbolism anymore, that's direct. And honestly, reality is not that far away. Wealth already increases lifespan dramatically. Better healthcare, better nutrition, lower stress, safer environments, more freedom, more recovery time. Money already buys life. The movie simply removes the polite disguise around it. And then comes the most dangerous part of the story. Will stops accepting the system as normal. That's where every threat to power begins. Not with violence, with awareness. The moment someone realizes scarcity is being engineered, the illusion starts cracking. Because systems survive by convincing people their suffering is natural, inevitable, deserved. But once people understand the game is designed intentionally, anger changes direction. And will starts redistributing time itself, not stealing luxury, not chasing status. Returning stolen life. And suddenly ordinary people experience something revolutionary. Enough. Enough time to breathe. Enough time to slow down. Enough time to think. And the movie shows how powerful that becomes immediately. People become calmer, more human, less desperate. Because desperation changes behavior. A desperate person thinks differently, acts differently, accepts things they normally wouldn't. Fear shrinks imagination. Survival mode narrows the future into tiny pieces. That's why scarcity is so psychologically effective. It keeps people focused downward instead of upward. But once people gain enough breathing room, they start noticing the structure above them. And that's dangerous for any system built on imbalance. There's another brilliant detail hidden inside in time most people miss. The clocks never stop moving. Even the rich constantly monitor time. Why? Because systems based entirely on accumulation eventually trap everyone psychologically, even the winners. The poor fear losing time. The rich obsess over protecting it. Nobody is truly free. That's the hidden cost of societies built entirely around economic value. Human worth becomes measurable. Every second becomes transactional. Life itself turns into a marketplace. And eventually people stop living. They start calculating. That's why the movie feels emotionally cold at times. Human connection gets distorted because survival pressure contaminates everything. Love becomes expensive, kindness becomes risky, even waiting becomes dangerous. And honestly, modern life already feels like this sometimes. People scheduling every second, monetizing hobbies, turning passions into productivity, feeling guilty for resting, measuring self-worth through output. As if existing peacefully without producing something has become unacceptable. That's the real horror of In Time. Not the clocks. The mindset. The idea that human life only has value when it generates economic movement. And the film quietly asks a question most people avoid. If your entire life is spent earning the right to continue living, are you actually free? Or just surviving more comfortably? Because there's a difference. A massive difference. That's why the rich in the movie fear redistribution so much. Not because resources are limited, but because dependency creates obedience. The moment people have enough security, they become harder to control. A person with options behaves differently than a person with none. That's true everywhere. And once you see that, you start understanding why so many systems push people toward endless urgency, endless consumption, endless anxiety, because exhausted people rarely challenge the machine causing their exhaustion. They just keep running. Like everyone on the clocks. At the end of In Time, the system begins breaking apart, time starts flowing back downward, chaos spreads, but alongside the chaos comes something else. Possibility. For the first time, people are no longer completely trapped inside artificial scarcity. And the movie leaves you with a haunting realization. The greatest form of theft isn't taking someone's money. It's taking their lifetime, their mornings, their peace, their freedom, their ability to fully exist without fear constantly hanging over them. Because once your entire life becomes survival, you no longer own your times. And if you don't own your times, what exactly do you own at all?